Hey everybody, John Tui here with Modern Day Musician, back for another thrilling conversation here about making music in the modern day and what that entails. I'm here with a great guest today. This is Emily Boyer, French horn player, professor, now radio host. And just to give you a little context before I turn a little bit of this over to her, I actually worked with her at Naugatuck Valley Community College in Connecticut for a while. And she taught a bunch of classes there and private lessons and things. And that's how we met. Which is now called CT State Naugatuck Valley. I don't want to, just so I don't get any haters in the comments. But it's great to see you, Emily. Thanks for having a conversation today.
It's wonderful to see you, John. Thanks so much for asking me to do this. I so appreciated our conversations when we worked together at NVCC, CT State Naugatuck Valley.
Yes.
So I love to be able to connect and have a conversation here in this venue.
That's great. Well, again, thank you so much. And before we get started, I'd love for you to tell everybody what your background is with as a performer, and where did music first hit you, and where did it turn into a point where you said, I'm gonna do this as my living, and then maybe a brief sort of sojourn from there to where you are now.
Sure. So I'm here at work at the radio station. So it's an interesting backdrop now. I've been in this position for almost 6 months, so it's still pretty new. And so it's not just because I'm here now, but I've really always told people that my journey with classical music started from when I was a kid, because I grew up on a farm, and my dad, who is my mom taught, so she had that job outside of the house. My dad was the one who basically worked from home and was in and out of the house, and always had our local classical radio station, public radio station, on during the day. And he was a fan, and it became something that I heard and we talk about. We'd like sit at dinner and he'd quiz me, Emily, who do you think the composer is, and stuff like that. And I was engaged with classical music. And so it became something that I knew about. And then, school band, I started with piano lessons. Then when I got to school band, I'm like, oh, I already can read music, so I need something hard. And I thought the horn looked awesome and it was shiny and twisty. So I wanted a challenge, and I wanted something that looked cool. And I had no idea really what it sounded like or any of the details that one might think about when one's choosing an instrument. So I'm thrilled that I chose horn, and I've stuck with it. And so I went to an arts high school, Interlochen, for high school. And then I went to Peabody Conservatory in Baltimore. And then I went to Yale for my master's degree, which is how I ended up in Connecticut. And when I was graduating, my teacher, Bill Purvis at Yale, the major piece of advice that I remember, I'm assuming he shares this with all the students, is, just know what the next thing is. And I thought that was really great advice, because that is what has kept me playing, basically, and because it's not, I didn't, win some full-time orchestra job or any of the things that would just slot into, okay, and now this is the stamp of a career in music. And it became, getting a job through a temp agency in an office setting for money, and then building stuff up. And really that job teaching music appreciation in Naugatuck Valley Community College I was like, oh yes, this is working in my field. Like, it's just doing what I want to be doing. And I love teaching music appreciation, I discovered. So that was perfect. And, gigs built up over time playing with orchestras around Connecticut. And I started my horn and harp duo, Apple Orange Pear, which then it was something, what's the next thing? Well, we had more control over what the next thing was. So it wasn't really a money-making venture, but it was something that we were always certain we were going to have a next thing. So it was always just the juggle of the next things. And I was doing various combinations of all of that stuff, and I'm happy to talk more about what those combinations were as we go through this. But definitely. Combinations of many part-time jobs teaching horn, music appreciation, music theory, until this past summer when I started this full-time job here at the radio station. And so I'm also teaching and performing, but that mix is starting to look different for me, and I'm open to that.
All right. So first of all, that's like a great life philosophy, is just make sure you know what is next, as opposed to trying to plot out 10-year plans or whatever that a lot of people say. I've always had a hard time with future forecasting more than a little bit of time. Maybe that's the nature of the music industry and things like that. But it also could just be that it's so, it's just so random a lot of the times what ends up falling in your lap, and you can't prepare for it versus, say, a traditional career building type thing. Does that relate to you a little bit? Has that helped, that philosophy?
Yes, 100%. And, my time teaching in the community college system, it was just always dependent upon enrollment. Like you wouldn't
Yeah.
know until a week or two before,
Yeah.
maybe a couple weeks before the semester started. And, so there's so much outside of my control. And, so just having a range of things so that at any given point, hopefully that you can kind of don't have total certainty, but a little more certainty that this is the thing that's going to be there. And so since I'll have that next thing, I'm not having nothing, and I can always keep building on something. Building on something is easier than having nothing and not knowing where to go.
Mm-hmm.
The times that it felt like really lean where there was very few things, that's really hard. And just, but figuring out what's just the one next thing is it has been very salient, helpful advice to me. I have really used that.
I love that. That gives me, just for you saying that, makes me feel less anxious, because my anxiety always tends to crop up when it's like I'm trying to forecast out and I'm like, oh yeah, but this might happen and this might, but if you just kind of, all right, well, let me plan just the next thing, and then it sort of takes on a life of its own. Always those times have been it's felt the most organic, I think, to grow that way. And that's a great philosophy to take to heart, and you learned it very early, which is amazing. Now, so there's a couple things in that. Let's talk about, you mentioned some lean times, which I think we all have had in creative professions of any stripe, in the arts period, right? So lean times are interesting, but the way I think of it, coming from the music that I have played, is that now actors must have it the most, really rough. Fine artists must have it really rough, because when I'm at a really low point, I can always go play $100 bar gig and I can eat for the day. Like at the very, if things are, I can always show up to a bar and do that. But it's not quite the same necessarily in your world, in sort of the classical music, art music world, right? So when you have, say, a lean time where there's not a lot of future performances, say, what did you do to kind of right the wagon, so to speak?
I think there's two ways to answer that, and one is artistic and the other is financial. And I'm curious right now, are you thinking in either direction?
Yeah.
Both directions?
Both is good. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to address the financial one first.
Yeah.
So I'm fortunate to be married to somebody with a job that includes benefits. And I will just say that is huge. And I'm beyond all my gratitude for that relationship. I'm grateful as a classical musician for what that has literally been able to be a foundation for me to be able to do work. On top of that stability. So I think it's important for me to be open about that. I would share that with anyone who asks, because I don't want to give the impression that teaching one adjunct course is like enough for a semester. That's not the economy the way the economy of things.
I actually don't think a lot of people know that. Like, I think the assumption would be, oh, you got your master's in performance, you teach at schools, you teach adjunct classes. Oh yes, so you must, of course you have health. What are you talking about? You work at Starbucks, you have health insurance. Like, I guess most people, you should know that is not a thing unless you're a full-time professor at an institution. You don't even get the offer to do that. So okay, that's that. Thank you for being candid on that, because it's a huge burden that you don't have to fulfill. Okay, now I need to make an extra whatever, couple grand a month to then pay for these things. You know, you can
Yeah.
that part is subsidized, which is amazing.
Yeah. And um so maybe that's the transition to the artistic side of things is, I'll be also honest that for quite a while I felt guilty about that, because I felt like then I'm not a real, like really struggling in some way that, like, independence, and like, what would it, and so I was like, okay, well, because I have this great marriage for which I'm very thankful, and it's sort of, this is what it is, and so I thought that could somehow diminish my art, my contribution artistically then to the world. And I'm not really sure how I got into that. I think it's probably like latent romantic ideals about what an artist is and how our society sees that. It's certainly something that I internalized. And I have intentionally let go of that line of thinking. It's not perfect, but I've had to be really intentional about it, because we don't have a lot of systems in our economy that are supporting artists. And so why not be grateful for, but we can all be grateful for what we have. All of our circumstances are different. This is my circumstance.
Yeah.
It's something that I've been given, and I will just use it to the best of my ability. So, part of my idea is, so it kind of turned things around for me. I thought, okay, well, this actually frees me up ever so slightly. I don't want to make it seem like it's not, I don't want to oversell it, but I just thought, it frees me up ever so slightly to I don't know, do a certain teaching mix that I feel like was sort of reaching students that I really wanted to be reaching, drive, spend a little bit more time in the car to make sure that there was like a horn teacher going somewhere, so that, the one horn student could have a horn teacher, because there's just a cost to all of these things. And so, the time to go and teach like one student is something that I thought, well, I can do this right now, and I believe in that, and I'm going to do that. So I've tried to use it. I've tried to reframe it and use it for good artistically there in terms of teaching. And also, the horn and harp duo that I mentioned, Apple, Orange, Pear. And I said that doesn't really make us money. And, I'm just so grateful. I think a lot of, at least many musicians might have a similar experience where, like, some of the deepest artistic fulfillment is the stuff that makes the least amount of money, but it's the fuel for other things. I think I've heard you talk about that, John, yourself. So I think that's true for a lot of people, and I've just tried to embrace it. Feel like that's not, I'm trying, just doesn't always have to be capitalist, and sometimes to just lean into, like, I'm trying to do something beautiful here and connect with people.
See, I mean, this is that classic tension. And there's, I was just speaking to a French classical musician from outside Paris. I worked with him last year, and he basically told me, he goes, it's true. Obviously we have a few things over there that I like better. He goes, but I'm over here because there's more performance opportunities. I can go do all these other things. The trade-off, essentially, is what he was saying, is that you are going to have to sing for your supper in a way that is not necessarily the artistic, glamorous thing all the time, but that can serve, is what can serve to get to the art that you want to do. I mean, even you read about the luminaries in the different eras. I mean, all of them had patrons. And the only reason they could do what they did is because someone said, "I like you, kid. Go. Okay, write me something." Even Mozart and Bach and all those, and go back even further. You had to have someone had to feed you for you to do the things that we now consider high art. So I definitely understand that tension you're talking about. And yeah, and I totally agree with you too, is that the things that are the nearest and dearest to my heart, not that it doesn't make some money, it does, and not that we don't sell records in my case, we do. And people come see us, but all of that ends up going back into the next thing for mile marker zero for example, my band I've been in forever. And so you are sort of on that with apple, orange, pear, is that you feel the same thing. You're like, I want to create and play music. I want to, perform and do all these things with this cool group. And I remember seeing you, God, it must have been 10 years ago now. And I thought it was awesome, and a very unique pairing. And we can talk about maybe how you do musical selection in a little bit too. But do you find that then when you do, say, perform a concert, that you end up, maybe there's very little financial receiving, but do you find that you also but you get so much out of it that it sort of gives you energy to do maybe some of the other things that you want to do?
It's the energy to, I mean, some of it is very practical. It's like the energy to keep it. It's a big lift as a horn player to play a full recital with like one other instrumentalist. And so some of the benefit is just like staying in shape. And also we're on this bit of a hiatus right now. And that's the other nice thing about kind of doing it on our own terms, is we can pause for a little bit and then like come back to it and all that. So it's been a couple of years since we've done a full concert together. But yeah, so some of it is very practical in terms of just like, this is horn playing, cool, I'm in shape kind of stuff. And if we schedule that regularly, then that becomes the way of being nicely in shape for everything else.
Mm-hmm.
The ability to choose our own programs, there's really not other work that I do that the
Right.
artistic choices in that respect are mine. And that's, to me, one of the biggest touch points is an important like feedback I get that keeps me going is like touch points with audience members and listeners. And that doesn't happen as much in the experiences that I've been able to have playing in orchestras.
Mm-hmm.
Also, horn, we're in the back row. I love playing in orchestra, but what it gives in terms of like the large full ensemble and the amazing repertoire, it's been harder for me to connect with in terms of like, what is it? What's the audience thinking? What was that experience like for them? What brought them here tonight? And those are the conversations of course we'd have, after a concert with Apple Orange Pear, and chatting with people who are in the audience. And I realized how important that was to me. Like, it's really important to me as a performer to be able to speak with people who are listening, and just because I'll remember that, and that'll help inform repertoire choices for the next time, or just make me feel like, yeah, these hours practicing at home are worth it because this is going to touch someone next time, one hopes.
Yeah, I find that some genres might lend itself more towards solipsism versus the connection that you're talking about. Like for you just said, tell me if I'm getting this wrong, but like, that one-on-one connection, especially if you play a small intimate concert, is incredible. And not only do you maybe get the energy off of the people attending, but when you end up talking to them after the performance, you get you're like, oh wow, this really, you can find where the connections are. What are the things that they're enjoying the most? What did they notice out of your thing? And you get a very human one-to-one reaction which you do find, at least in my experience, you find that when you're playing concerts, if it's jazz, or if it's, a lot of times those are small venues and you're right up against people, and you kind of get that feeling.
Yeah.
Or with mile marker zero, for instance, I make it a point to talk to anybody who came, because it's like, they spent time and their effort and their money, and maybe they got a babysitter or whatever all the thing is, and that's very important. Whereas maybe as the back line of in an orchestra, that might not be sort of the expectation, is to have that true like one-to-one audience connection. Do you find that because you do the small group thing, that just makes you feel more connected to the music and the people than versus being one player in an orchestra? Can you feel the divide? This is a long-winded question. Maybe I'm going to edit it out. But do you feel the divide there?
I know. I think it's a good question, and it's a question. And yes, I definitely feel the divide. And actually, I didn't. I've always felt this way, that I enjoyed playing in band and orchestra, say like through school and stuff. Primary experiences through school. And you just kind of, unless you talk about it, you kind of assume that everyone feels and thinks what you feel and think, right? So, but the more you talk to people and get to know people, I distinctly remember the first time talking to another horn player and saying something like, "Oh, but we don't really get to interact with the audience very much. That's too bad," or something. And their reaction just kind of like, "Oh yeah, good. No, that's not for me." And they had really wonderful reasons why they love playing in band and orchestra. It just wasn't about a personal connection with the listeners. They wanted the listeners to be impacted. I mean, yeah, there was no fault in it. It was just simply different. And that helped me recognize, oh, this is actually something about being a performer that is really important to me and isn't necessarily equally important to everybody. And so maybe this is something that it was pretty early on in like for school, but pretty early on. And so it helped me think like, okay, maybe this is something I can lean into. This is maybe this is a strength that I can offer if I play it up that way.
Oh, I love that. So this isn't something you sort of had to discover over time. This was more like you felt it pretty much immediately after school and were like, okay, I want to do more of this then, because that one-on-one connection is really important to me. Not that you will not play with orchestras, but you want to make sure you at least have this as a chunk in your life. The small group presentations, is that accurate?
Yeah. And it's informed I didn't even mention this before, but for a while I worked in church music, and that's also, of course, very personal and one-on-one and related to the impact of music in someone's life deeply. Teaching is also, really one-on-one. So when I see the through line, the things that I've thought out, the things that I've stuck with have really all had relational components that I would not have guessed that about myself. I can be pretty introverted, and I'm definitely the sort of person who can practice for hours at home and, very sort of typical classical musician. But I want to make sure that those hours are transitioned into something that I guess I appreciate the feedback of the people who are benefiting from that.
Yeah,
who could benefit, who I hope are benefiting.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's a very human-centric, heart-centric sort of way to pursue your career and your artistic goals. Like, I think, well, I'll speak for me and my friends that I know, that I find that a lot of time that doesn't really show up until later for a lot of people. Like, you're kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall in a lot of ways to try to figure out what is your niche, what is where is that pathway that you need to carve, what are the things that you feel more drawn to, and the fact that you found that out pretty early is, I think, a good indication of having a strong intuitive sense that I don't know a lot of musicians actually is very innate. Like, I know that's taken a while for me to hone. Like, I always had these feelings, but I would always question the feelings. I know I don't like, but maybe I should. And then the what ifs and the shoulds and the buts and all those things. But it seemed like you were able to clear those out somewhat.
Yes. And it deeply resonates, like the should. I mean, as a horn player, why else would one get a master's degree in horn other than to take auditions and get an orchestra job?
Sure.
I mean, at least that was the assumption and the narrative when I was in school. And I can't speak to how much that's changed since I was in school, but that really is such an assumed thing. And I took many, many orchestra auditions, and that was just not the path for me. And so I even knew, like, at the same, I knew going through it, I was like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I've trained for. This would be a very reliable line of work that is playing my instrument, which I want to be doing. But it wasn't like I need to be playing in an orchestra. I just kind of wanted to do the thing I did feel a sense of like, I want to be doing the thing that gives me validation that what I'm doing has been worth, And so
Yeah.
I don't want to make it seem like I was so knew myself that I could just say no to things
No,
that
yeah,
weren't
no, yeah.
me, because it was also through the process of, doing all the things that I discovered this is just not me, but still doing it because I thought this is what everyone's doing, and I guess this is what I'm meant to be doing. I just had to go through that process. I don't know. I'm still in the process, but I'm grateful that I have been able to get like a step farther with like, okay, some stuff is just not going to be for me, and that's
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, and certainly, I think there's always a winnowing away and a honing in on exactly what it is that you are designed for and meant for and things, and that's a tough thing. So of course you don't. There's a couple people I know that kind of just knew from early childhood. They're like, yep, this is what I'm gonna, and they just pursued it doggedly. And I know, and I sort of envy that in a way, because it's just like they for some reason they had that intuitive sort of, I got it. But for most of us, I just don't think that that's realistic, especially when you then interface that with, look, there's only so many orchestra jobs in the world, and they're not getting more over time. So just on a pure mathematical numbers adjusted basis. So, okay. So there's a few things that lead from this, I think. One is talking about, one of the things I'd written for possible discussion topics are the perception of classical music as elitists. And this is sort of what we're talking about here, and how you are able to, it could be through your music appreciation teaching or through your lessons or whatever, or your work at the radio station or your performance with Apple Orange Pear, pick your path in there. Has it been a mission for you to try to, I don't know, bring it down to earth, some of this music that you love, or try to get it in a way that is relatable without being corny about it? Or like, how does that play out for you? Maybe I'm thinking more instruction right now, but
100% all the time. And I think that's one of the things that I felt frustrated by when I'm not interacting with, when I don't feel like I have more communication tools with listeners and audiences, is I feel like I'm not working towards that goal. It's really important. So like I mean, the fact of the matter is classical musicians now have inherited the work of people before us that actively work to make it elitist. So it's not coincidental. It's not something that is just from like our perception now. Maybe now we're a little more casual and music used to be a little more formal. Those are relative terms, and one could frame it that way if one looks at it a certain way, but there really was active work during the decades, like maybe more than a century, probably more, to let's say elevate the music sort of as like an aspirational, high-minded kind of thing. Maybe to put it nicely. The flip side of that is that then disenfranchises people and makes people feel like it's not for them, and it doesn't help the music itself be. I mean, now that music is available to everyone all the time through streaming and the radio, so like now that music is so available, it people still don't think it's available because of the way that societal structure was set up. So there's, it's not like I'm an expert on this, but I don't think there's any like ticket price or venue or like streaming platform that can just in one fell swoop take down all of the work that's been put into to make it so elitist. So it is it will probably be a long and like a long process for classical musicians and the world of classical music to change that and break that down because of how long it took to build up. And I think if that's what we want, I think most of us want that, but I can't speak for the whole field.
Sure.
And I think many of us are really blind, even though we really are on board with making it less elitist. Really, still, it's like you don't see we kind of are blind to the little ways that that are reinforcing that because we've inherited it. So for example, like since I've started this radio job, I've really had to think in a really intentional way about how I talk about the names of pieces. So when I would talk music appreciation, like Mozart Symphony Number 40 is maybe his most famous symphony, but like, what does that mean? Like, symphony, is that the name of a piece? Is that the name of the performing group? Is it both? What is that? Like number 40, like what information does that give me? And I could like break it down to the students, and I told them, it would be like, I don't know if they have this experience, but like going into a wine store and being overwhelmed with all these labels of all this information that you don't know what it means and you're too embarrassed to ask. And a lot of classical music labels are that way. And so the thing with the radio, it's not like I'm sitting down with people like, let's unpack this title. It's like, how can I just simply say it? So if someone has just gotten in their car, turned on the radio, and this is some piece just ends and I'm going to announce the next thing, what invites somebody into thinking, oh yeah, okay, this could be for me. There's not some poetic title. It's not like the Mozart Symphony with the fluttering strings and violas at the beginning or whatever, like it doesn't speak for itself in that way. So that's the work for one. And it's also like, I guess it's just awareness of that's as simple as just how we talk about the names of pieces.
Yeah, no, that's a really,
it just gets everywhere.
Well, because that could be a huge barrier, because it's just like, wait a second, so you have 39 ones before. I mean, where do I start? Like, I find that, and I'm not nearly as well versed in the classical repertoire as you are. I don't, even for me, it's like I don't know really where to start. What is considered sort of, say, Mozart's best? I mean, I know what I like, but like is like third on the list of importance. Like, I don't even, but I know that there's some general consensus as to why this is, considered a better piece than another, or of the time period that he was composing this. This is the best of that spot. I think things like that, even though they seem on the surface to not be huge barriers, I think they could be very, very intensely jargon-esque. It's like if you're, a biologist and you start rattling off all these terms to someone, it's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I need it to be sort of in a way that I can relate to. So I'm assuming that let's say in your classes, you made a point to kind of describe not just necessarily the titles, but all right, here's what to listen for in when I play you this. Check this out. This is why this is cool. Is that like, do you have any examples of things that you've taught before in a manner similar to that?
I hope most things I teach come across in that manner. I try to be careful not to say, this is Mozart's best symphony, because there's just so many lenses to evaluate that. Sure. And I'm really skeptical of anyone who, like, what's the agenda behind someone saying this is the best? Yeah. So some music is really programmatic. When I was teaching music appreciation, the Moldau by Smetana, Bedřich Smetana, it literally, the guy wrote a paragraph describing, like, here's this 11-minute piece, and we're starting at the little streams that are coming together to form the beginning of the Moldau River. And then we're going to flow down the river and you're going to hear melody. This is the river melody. And then we're going to like go through the woods. We're going to go past a wedding celebration. There's a ruined castle. And like, it's so, vivid, that I think the way the music, even though it's from a different time, a different culture, it's part of a Western tradition that we've adopted, that is predominant here. And so it's a language that we speak enough to be able to hear this in the music. And so I think when the music, so that's the point in which, I think for folks that listen to classical music and everything has a pictorial story along with it, when the composer says, oh, here's my story, I think that feels validating, like the sort of feedback the students would give. So I really love those touch points, because for some people, music without words is their mind becomes full of images and stories. It's like the soundtrack to a movie for them. And it's not that way for me. And I think that's amazing. And I would love to know more about what that's like. And I think it's my early training where I kind of initially was like, here's how we read music and here's how we do this. And I don't know, there could be a lot of reasons, but, and, and then also, earlier on, just the composer's story, we were talking about like patronage, just playing a piece in the past day or two here at the radio station. It was like Mozart had already had this period of success, commissioned for operas, and people were clamoring for his work. And then that died down, and he got this part-time job working at the, with like patronage in the court in Vienna. It was a part-time job as like writing chamber music. And so there was this piece that was basically like kind of functional music for background entertainment. And it is enjoyable and it's a quality to listen to, and we play it, and it's Mozart. But it's also I think that's really relatable for people. Like, good things come and go, and that you're writing music, that it's functional. It's not just like he was like hit by inspiration. It was to fill a need.
Yeah, and when you find, I remember reading about which town was Bach in, when he essentially, his contract said something like, okay, so you're going to write X amount of cantatas. You're going to write X amount of things. I have a ball that's later in the year, and you're going to, I forget who the king was or the duke was that he was. My Gil's going to kill me not remembering this, but shout out Gil Harrell.
It's okay. I'm going to speak on behalf of all of classical music right now. I'm going to say,
okay.
It's okay.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. But it's funny, like you're talking about the sort of like functional. It's like, well, all right, I got to write my mass. I'm got to write this piece. Oh yeah, there's a dance. Okay, what is it? It's waltz. Okay, I got to do like, so there's actually some great pieces were not divine inspiration necessarily. It's like, okay, I got till Friday, and let's crank something out that's functional. And it's almost kind of, you said validating before. It's almost kind of validating to be like, oh, well, I do that too. When I have to write 100%. And arrange something for like, I know it's not high art what I'm making here, but it's functional. But like these people that we consider high art also were doing functional things like that.
Yeah, finding ways to be creative and connect with other musicians in the midst of the practicalities of their job, to me, will always be interesting about every composer. And I think that's interesting to people in general. I mean, I'm biased because I'm also curious about what it is to be a professional musician. But I think there's enough universality about what is it to face like the mundane realities of life while also having big aspirations and hopes and dreams for your life, with your family, for your work, what you can be in the world, and just keeping all that in tension. And I think that when we have insights into how composers might have, and performers as well, musicians might have, are navigating that, it's interesting that the music is an interesting insight into that in a different way than a memoir or other forms of communicating.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. So this dovetails nicely into what you do at the radio station, because obviously now you said, what has it been, 6 months? You said that you've been
about that, yeah.
Okay, so
about 5 months on air.
5 months on air, but
yeah.
There's a lot of training for a month. I'll tell you that much.
Having never been in a radio, like never worked in radio before, it's been phenomenal to bring in somebody with a classical music background, so didn't have the radio background, and to be trained in that, and to be given this opportunity. And so, yes,
yeah.
Hence the few weeks between starting and going on air.
Yeah, and all the technical know-how you have to have, right?
Yes, learning how to push the buttons in this room,
work the board, all that stuff. So tell me what your your job there entails. I mean, this is something that, you know, I'm constantly trying on these podcasts to talk about different avenues that are musically inclined and different things that you can do. And this is a new avenue for me to talk about. So tell me about what your job entails when you're at the station. Like what are the things that you're responsible for? And maybe we'll go from there.
So I'm live on air, announcing classical music on WSHU 91.1 FM. Yeah, you can roll
nice.
that. And from 9 to 1 every weekday. And so, you know, I get here like 8:15ish, and I come having already prepared what I'm going to say about each piece.
Mm-hmm.
And there are usually like 3 or 4 pieces per hour. And then it's 4 hours of music. And so I come in with time to all the music is played off of a hard drive. So like loading the music to be able to click play at the right time, and all the other things, like, so for example, the public radio station, we have underwriters who support us. And so announcing those, making sure I have the list ready to say that on air, all those kind of like nuts and bolts. And then once, and and I'll be honest, there's like a few more nuts and bolts like that than I realized. It's not onerous, but I think I, as an avid classical radio listener, always thought, well, what do people do during a 30-minute symphony? You know, like what's happening? The person like sitting there just like relishing in the music. Sometimes I get to just think, wow, this is my job. I just get to sit here for a couple minutes while this beautiful music plays. And then sometimes I'm like taking notes and juggling papers to think of, you know, to make sure the right thing gets said over in the next break between pieces. So the bulk of the work is the on-air time, and then the prep, thinking about what I'm going to say, because it's important to me that it be something that's relatable. If someone, like I said, just kind of pops in their car at any given point, someone can turn on the radio. And so you can't be like, well, so as I said 5 minutes ago, da 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 da, which is very different from teaching music appreciation, where I'm always trying to like build the musical memory and like the thought castle. I don't know how to say it. You know, like you're always trying to say something and build on that and touch back on it. And this is the opposite of that. It's like you can never reference back to the past. So everything has to be said in a way that someone could just be tuning in. But also there might be someone who's been listening all day, and they listen every day, and they're and just like a daily companion. And I love that.
Yeah. So you have to think about the messaging in a way that can kind of fulfill both roles. Is that how you think about it? Someone who knows this stuff and is looking forward to hearing this every day because that's what they turn it on. But also someone who flips on the station and hears something, and then you have to give some information that puts some context to it. How do you balance that? Like what do you look for in a description?
So first off, try to be very aware not to be jargony, and like checking, and then checking again to not be jargony, because I know it can be so ingrained. So I hope it doesn't, you know, I just try to use as plain of language as possible. Again, I think that's kind of a messaging thing that if already classical music is perceived as elitist. So if the person announcing it is using just, you know, like flowery language, there's a time for that. If it's a choice about a piece coming up, for the most part, just, you know, just kind of say it and let the music speak for itself. Let the music be the flowery, you know, the intriguing artistic part of it. And something that I really appreciate that's very different from my teaching experience and my own experience being a student is thinking about really pointing towards and highlighting the emotional impact of the music. I mean, my experience, my memory in school was that was rarely, if ever, talked about. It was about the history of the music, the sort of technical composition of the music, how to execute the music well, how to execute the music with expression, generally driven by like the technical requirements to add your own personal expression. So it's not to say that it's not, music in school was devoid of expression, but it wasn't, I don't recall any conversations that were just like, what emotions does this music bring up for you? In like an open-ended conversation like that. And, but as I taught music appreciation and worked with other students, I'm like, oh my gosh, of course, that's oftentimes people's first and biggest and best touch point with this music.
Oh, right.
Duh.
Right.
So,
Right.
just like frankly, building up that skill for myself, setting aside
Yeah.
my like music theory hat, my music history hat,
Yeah.
my horn player hat, and just as a person, like, what is it like to hear this piece at 9 a.m? Well, geez, if you've been like rushing to get to work and this is what's on in the background in your office or whatever, like, what does it feel like to hear this music at this time?
Yeah. Oh man, I call that hazard of the trade. And this is something that my wife says all the time. Can't you just enjoy when I'm out hearing a band or something? Can't you just enjoy? And my first thought is, no, like not immediately. I actually have to work on it because I spent so much, and this is what you're talking about. There's so much that goes into playing an instrument and learning a craft and understanding the mechanics, like you said, and all that goes into it, that you end up training and funneling your brain towards those things because you have to as a performer. There's almost no way to not do that. Unfortunately, the hazard of the trade part comes when initially, what was your first experience of music, and what is a normal person who doesn't have that training? What's the visceral sort of feeling they get? What does it touch on? What are the emotional connections? Those sort of get, I'll speak for myself, got winnowed away over some time, and I had to actually like come to a point where I'm going, I have to like tell myself if I'm going to go someplace, I'm like, okay, just shut that part off. And it took me a while. I mean, it took me plenty of time after I graduated school to really just be able to go, okay, and shut it off, and then, and sort of just let it happen like it had done before I had guitar lessons or whatever,
Yeah.
And so you're doing that in a way to really, to you have to sort of get rid of the I hate to say baggage, because it's great that you have that training and all that stuff, but it sort of does become a barrier maybe between you and the listener, especially in the radio station, right? And you go, okay, all right, I have to get rid of the barrier first so I can push this forward.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I just try to think of it as expanding the repertoire of ways to talk about the music and understand it versus like this or that kind of thing, because this is for my own sake. Because of my training, I don't want to be perceived as like, oh, well, she just has to talk about something as simple as how the music might make you feel, rather than something more learned, and I had to just let go of that worry because, and I think this speaks to so much about the elitism of classical music that we're talking about, because we're kind of as classical musicians, I'm 100%, we're kind of policing each other, about like, and I don't want to perpetuate that. And I want it to be an open, inclusive community that folks who are listening to the music and enjoying it because of how it makes them feel are 100% a part
Welcome.
of the classical music community.
Mm-hmm.
And so I can't be worried that someone, who is going to turn on and be like, this lady on the classical radio station isn't telling us like all the like music history facts about this piece. No, not right now. Not right now. I'm not. That's maybe next time, and I try to like, mix it up. But that's part of my own, something I've discovered for myself as I've been doing this.
It's interesting that we have a parallel in that way, different musics, but also, I think I would imagine that anybody who's gone through a long time of training and things, it's sort of, you have a filter that you hear things from, and getting outside the filter is hard sometimes, but ultimately rewarding, because I mean, especially in what you're doing now at the radio station, if the better you can sort of have theory of mind of the listener as opposed to through your filter, the better that's going to connect when you're talking about a piece or whatever. And it really, you'll get to that, almost that one-on-one connection you were talking about before, in a way where you can speak to the person on where they're coming from.
That's my sincere hope. That's my goal.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a beautiful thing. I think there's so many. Life is very chaotic these days, and there's a lot of things that you could be obsessed by and drown in negativity and all those things. And but one antidote to these things is beautiful music and art and things that can help keep some of those demons at bay in a way, And so if you're helping people experience that, I think that's a incredibly worthwhile and noble.
It does feel like something. I want it to be something that people know they can come back to, and that's not just me. That's like why the station is here, and so I'm super grateful to be a part of it. And I think as all of the music, yeah, I performing, teaching. I hope that's what we can be working towards.
Oh, that's awesome. Okay, I have a couple of the things that I want to talk to you about. You were teaching at a time when we're now technologically things are changing. I mean, we are old enough where pretty much when we were young, it was all chalkboards and then dry, right. And transparencies and then dry erase boards came in. It was like, whoa, what is this? And like now it's, and it's only ratcheted up ever since that time. So I'm wondering if there's any things so you're teaching about music that is from a minimum of 150 years ago or more back predominantly, right? Is that like you didn't in your classes, or did you also reach into the 20th century and things too?
Um, so full disclosure, I did not teach the class chronologically when I taught music appreciation. And
Okay.
I spent a lot of time talking about music that was a range of music that was from within the past 50 years, which seems like a long time through other musical lenses. But in the classical music world, it's all pretty recent, while also, of course, going back for hundreds of years.
Okay, that's cool. Okay, so let's say when you're talking about the repertoire that's from the past, were there any, because of my question, I guess, is that there's these new technologies available to put these things forward. Is there anything that you use that maybe is sort of a more modern day thing to bring these songs or these pieces to your students? I'm thinking, teaching classical music in a digital age is sort of what I'm going towards. And anything like that?
This is my biggest question, right? I don't have anything, like I don't have any clever tips or tricks in answer to your question.
Okay.
But here's my biggest question that I've been trying to solve about this question in teaching. And I am so curious about new technologies and love it. So I'd like to be open to all of that. Mm-hmm. One thing I've and just the ability, I use Google Docs for every student to keep notes back and forth, so that it's so easy to just put links to music and stuff, audio files and links to places where sheet music is, and like snippets, the little add-on where you can like literally put like exercises and stuff in music notation. So with all of that ease in communication, the one thing I've noticed that I was really essential for me as a developing musician was having a CD collection. And it's not because they're the CDs. It was, I think the benefits were, first of all, music that was mine. Like if I had a bunch of horn CDs, it helped me kind of identify, like, I am a horn player. This makes me, not all my friends have a bunch of CDs of horn solos. So this, like, it was sort of reinforcing the, like, this isn't like a momentary thing. Like this is, I'm building up an identity of something that because I like how this sounds and I really care about this. These liner notes that had all this information that taught me about horn and horn players and what their experiences were and the sort of music that they played. And so it's not, I'm not trying to, I just think that what would have, I'm trying to help my students figure out how to have what I had without making, I don't think buying CDs, acquiring CDs aren't the answer. But I think what's the way to feel a sense of ownership and curiosity about folks that are playing your instrument. And I think one of the benefits that we have now is that they're the way music is on the internet, there's not the same gatekeeping for the sorts of players that students can hear and access.
Yeah.
And so that is wonderful. And so how to do that in a way that, I don't know if it's having students, I've thought about things. I don't know if it's having students keep like a listening journal. But like, and I don't know if this is good or bad. Like, I just remember being able to kind of rattle off some names of some like major horn players who were on these CDs. And now it's harder for me to like, I don't want to just make students memorize names of horn players from the 20th century. That doesn't seem like the right answer either, you know, and that's not a very inclusive group. But it's kind of like that. And so I know I'm just answering your question with another question.
No, it's
but
good though.
I think that I think the technologies that I use are probably the technologies that are sort of most people are using. And there's nothing, it's just, I'm really curious how the technologies themselves are shaping how we learn and how something is our knowledge. What's ours?
Yeah,
what does that mean?
That's a great question. And I think it's ever evolving. So I think you're right about not having tips and tricks. I mean, the one thing that came to mind as you were saying, I was like YouTube, what we're on now, like YouTube is like, you can find every performance of anything at any point when I was, you had to know someone, like you said, you had to get a CD or whatever, or you'd have to know someone go, oh, you have to go listen to this. So there's a value in that. But now if you want to see something, you want to hear it, you can go on YouTube and check it out. And then also I'll do a plug for, I'm not sponsored, but Moises.ai, an incredible company that has figured out how to take a audio recording and then separate out all the instrument tracks. Now, I don't know if they've gotten to like symphony orchestra level yet. I don't think they have, but using AI, they can take, you can go in and go, you put in your favorite song, you go, all right, take out, what do you want? Oh, I want drums, bass, guitar, lead vocals, background vocals, keyboards. And it'll go through in AI and go shh, and pretty accurately separate it all. So for a study of an instrument, if you want to hear how so-and-so played something on a recording, you go in, you go, all right, let me just turn down everything else and let me hear the guitar or whatever, and it's pretty amazing. I mean, those kind of things. And then you can change the key, you can do practice tempos, and you can move it back. So like, which I would have killed for back in the day, rather than just my Dr. Beat going 1, 2, 3, 4, trying to practice along, exactly. So those would be my two little things to check out. And if you haven't checked out Moises, I think it's like $4 a month. It's excellent. And you can do they have a free trial too. Not being sponsored by them, but it's quite wild. And so if that is a place where where it is now, imagine in 5 years, I'm picturing they're already starting to do this with movies and things, but have a symphony recorded and you can actually put on your Apple Vision glasses or whatever and have surrounds as if you're in virtual reality. You're up there in the middle of the orchestra and you're hearing them play. I mean, there could be some incredible when I'm being positive about these things, there could actually be some real incredible opportunities and things that you would never get. When are you ever the conductor of the New York Philharmonic or whatever? Like, no one has that experience except for, a dozen people since its inception. Like, you could maybe be that. You could get up there and you can, so I think that hopefully on the plus side, that's the way you end up owning it. Like you're saying, what is yours? Because you will actually get a experience, although simulated, it's close enough to the real thing that there can be a thing that is, wow, yeah, I did conduct the Boston Pops. I did do, I don't know. I don't know if that sparks anything for you.
Yeah. I mean, I just having like on YouTube, the piano accompaniments to solos the students are working on, and it's just, changing this playback speed just even through, I mean, that's not, you can just see like the 75% or whatever. I mean, I'm jealous. I'm jealous that the students get to learn hear the accompaniment from the beginning.
Yeah, that's a simple thing, but that's huge, man. I don't know. It's like, it's amazing how, if you're a musician coming up now, and that's a lot of what I talk about on this show, is like, you're in school now, or you're just out of school. You have all these technologies available that can really make things pop for you in a way, and you can learn in your style versus some other ways. Some people are better auditory learners, some people are better visual learners, and all these different things, and you can kind of find your way to any one of those that works, which is, I think, one of the beauties of modern day.
I've had students kind of shyly tell me like, oh yeah, well, I found this app. I remember a few years ago, a student telling me about, I don't remember the name of it, an app that he would, like he mostly learned things by ear. And so we were building up his skills at reading music notation. And so he sort of shyly told me that he found an app that he could take a picture of the music notation and it would play it for him. And, you know, understandably, he was shyly telling me about this because he knew this was a skill that we were intentionally trying to build up for him in the lessons. And I was like, well, I didn't know this existed, and I think this is amazing. Like, I think it's amazing that and so wonderful that this is in the mix. Of course, we're going to use this. Like, let's keep doing this. Here's some suggestions for how I think you can scaffold this and to learn more quickly. You know, like, and so I hope as a teacher, I'm grateful he did bravely bring it up to me, and I hope that I like present as open. But I can totally understand students. Either like my teacher's older and so it's not a technology that they had growing up, so they're going to think like it's not valuable, or, you know, negative judgment. Of course, we're always worried about that. And, you know, there are times where I, you know, like for the sake of focus, you know, we're going to not use these things. So the managing is hard. And it's part of knowing ourselves, how with all the possibilities, what to actually try. And I love how you said that, like what's going to pop and what's going to meet each of us where we are, students, all humans, learners, musicians.
One more question for you, and then I'm going to ask you to tell me where people can listen to your music and get in touch with you. Time management. And just spend a couple minutes on this. As a freelance musician and teacher and all the things that you've had to do, is there anyone concurrently, of course, you know, all those things sort of together, putting 50,000 miles on your car every year. Has there been any sort of one or two things you can think of that have been very helpful in figuring out how to be good at time management? Or is this something that you're naturally good at?
I'm pretty naturally good at being organized. So I don't think I'm like chaotic, but I can get fixated on, if I get into something, I mean, some of this is just like good flow. You can get into something and lose sense of time. And you want to like be able to have time for that as everyone, especially people who are artists. But the biggest pitfall that I found for myself is that I would use some jobs to procrastinate from doing the thing I didn't want to do in a different job. So I'd kind of like I would meet deadlines and get stuff done and it would be okay. But it wasn't efficient, and it was from this very emotional, like, I don't want to kind of place.
Oh, so, boy, do I know that. Okay. This is great. I need this advice, whatever you're going to say.
Well, the thing that got better for me was a few years ago when I would, I designed a table in Word that I would print out a new one every week. So it's a full 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. That's a table, and it's one per week. So the days go across the top, and down the left-hand side it's a grid, and down the left-hand side, I have different categories. And so some of them are just, like personal things, like I want to do a yoga routine every day. And so that would be there. And so some of those are those things that you kind of mean to do every day. And for me, it was like I do it, but then I end up spending like a lot of time on it. Like time was kind of expanding. I was spending too much time on some of those things. Mm-hmm. And then there's all like the practice session 1, practice session 2. I would list all the jobs that are, and it just is a grid that it helps me have a visual of like, well, here's the time that I know is just going to be eaten up by like driving or other basic things that it takes to live our life. Some of the things that I want to do, like the yoga, you know, that's going to take time. I think I kind of got into this like, oh, some of those, you know, I'd like brushed off like, oh, this doesn't really take time. It does take time. And so when I saw, okay, this is why I feel like I'm not getting as much done as I could be getting done. Well, because wasn't accounting for my time properly. So when I set up this grid, I like put circled in the things that apply to that day, and then checks when they're done. So I can just tell that if I have circled in like every category, like I can't work for all I couldn't do something for all 7 jobs and do, live my best life doing a 45-minute yoga routine, reading a novel for an hour,
Hmm.
cooking dinner. Like I thought that I could, but of course I can't. And so it just helps me. It helps me track through the week. And then it was also obvious, like, oh, I feel like my horn playing is a little meh. Oh, it's because I didn't get as much practice time. Look where those check marks are. Look where those check marks aren't.
Right.
Oh, I don't feel like I'm as prepared to teach this thing. Well, look where I didn't spend my time this week. And
Some
so
of
it
it's like
became,
auditing. Like you're like, oh,
yeah,
this is what I didn't actually get to this. I have circles and I have no check marks, and that means I put it on some other things. And so, do you find that that's a good way to sort of shift to reprioritize if you're out of whack a little bit? You
yeah,
find that seeing that just helps you go, okay, right, more on this, less on this.
yeah. It helps keep me honest to that I have limited time, that if I want something to happen, these are the days that I need to put effort into seeing it happen at the time that it which needs to be done.
That's
So it's not that I'm perfect. So it's basically helped take the emotional part, set aside the emotional I don't wanna,
mhm.
and just give myself more like discrete tracking day by day.
That's really practical and really helpful. I think I'm going to start doing that. That's great. Thank you.
I
Thank
also
you.
like pretty looking things, so it's on a nice clipboard, and it's aesthetically appealing to me because I knew that I was going to have to
Have to
draw
look
myself
at it.
into want to do it.
Right. It has to. It actually has to look decent. See, I like really
Yeah.
ugly looking papers. Everything's
Oh
ripped.
yeah.
There's just lines over everything. So maybe. No, just
You
kidding.
can get custom ripped paper that you
No,
can print yours out on.
yes, yes. Go on Etsy, find that. But Emily, this was really great talking to you. Thank you so much for your time. Can you tell the people where they can find you? I'll also put it in the show notes and things too. But where should people reach out to you to listen to your music, or for anything at the station? Give me the details.
So my own website is emilyboyer.com. And so that has a way, we've mentioned Apple Orange Pear, that has a way to link to Apple Orange Pear and here's some of our work with the horn and harp duo there. And also, um, yeah, that's where all the information about me is. I'm also on Instagram at Emily Boyer Music, which I've started building up since doing this job. And if you follow me on Instagram, you can see little videos I do right from this space. You can recognize this space. And then the radio station, you can listen to me on air on 91.1 FM, and you can listen from anywhere online at wshu.org. I would love for you to tune in sometime between 9 and 1 a.m. on weekdays Eastern Time.
Thank you so much for talking to me, and I hope to see you soon.
Thanks so much, Don. This has been wonderful.